Sir, if you'd raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to provide this court and jury shall be the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated. Once you're settled in and close enough to that microphone, if you could state your full name for our court reporter and spell your last name.
My name is Raymond Caron, last name C-A-R-O-N.
Thank you, Mr. Caron. And I want to remind you, Mr. Caron, because we're all wearing masks, it's a little bit harder to hear, so if you could project your voice normally, louder than you normally would. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Caron.
Good morning.
Mr. Caron, are you familiar with William Argie?
I am.
Do you see him here in the courtroom today?
I do.
Can you please identify him and describe an article of clothing he's wearing for the record?
Sure. He's the third person at the defendant table wearing glasses.
Your Honor, if the record would please reflect the witness has identified the defendant.
It will.
Mr. Caron, how do you know the defendant?
He's one of my best friends.
When did you two become friends?
1999.
Can you explain how the two of you became friends?
College courses. We were taking the same one and just clicked from there.
And at that time, what were you two going to school for?
I was doing prerequisite coursing for nursing, and William was taking courses. I believe it was for physical therapy, later for PA.
And by PA, do you mean physician's assistant?
I do.
Through the years, how would you describe your relationship with the defendant?
William has always been one of my best friends.
Were you in his wedding?
I was.
Are you familiar with any of his other close friends?
I am.
And who are some of those friends?
TJ, Dan LaRochelle, Tank.
And from your friendship with the defendant, did you meet and come to know his wife, Maureen Argie?
Yes.
How would you describe Maureen?
She was a saint. She was a sweet soul. She always looked for the good in everyone. She was quiet, but just sweet, a sweet person.
From your friendship with the defendant, did you also become familiar with his mother, Brenda Quinn?
I did.
Can you describe what the defendant's relationship was like with her?
Very tight.
I'd like to direct your attention to March 2018. Do you recall an intervention for the defendant around that time?
I do.
And we're just going to talk about that for a few minutes. Was one of the purposes of that intervention to address the defendant's verbal abuse of Maureen?
Yes.
Who attended that intervention?
Myself, Dan LaRochelle, Brenda Quinn, Billy's sisters, and Maureen and Billy.
Without getting into anybody else's statements at the intervention, can you describe the defendant's demeanor and body language toward Maureen at the intervention?
He was very pissed.
What did
Very
you see?
angry.
Can you describe what you saw about him that made you know that?
He was glaring at her, very clenched fist, very tight-jawed, and just staring her down.
Immediately following the intervention, do you recall whether the defendant still considered you a friend?
I hadn't spoke to Billy for a couple of months after the intervention.
Did the defendant tell you how he felt about you after the intervention?
He told us that, told me that he felt betrayed by our friendship.
Do you recall reconnecting with the defendant around June 2018?
I do.
And can you explain how you two reconnected?
At my wedding.
I'd like to now direct your attention to March 2019. This is State's Exhibit 42, a numbered chart that the jury's familiar with. During this time frame, was your cell phone number, as circled right here,
Correct.
603-860-1914?
Yes,
All right, thank you. So again, during March 2019, during that time frame, do you recall whether the defendant left you a voicemail during the days before Maureen's death?
I do.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 43, a communications chart. And right here, I'd just like to direct your attention, 3:35 p.m. on March 31st, a sent phone call to 603-860-1914. Again, is that your phone number?
It is.
Oh, sorry. And in response to that, that voicemail that he left you, do you recall whether you actually connected with the defendant?
I called him back after that, after I got the message.
Now, during this time frame, do you recall whether you were in regular contact with the defendant?
I was in touch with William approximately every month, a month and a half. We had a little downtime after the holidays. Prior to the holidays, we were talking on a monthly basis.
All right, and now I'm going to direct your attention to April 2nd, 2019. And you testified that you called him back.
Yes,
And does this communications chart reflect your call back to him on April 2nd, 2019?
it does.
So during that phone call that you had with the defendant on April 2nd, was about 1,545 seconds, or about 26 minutes. Do you recall the defendant saying how he was doing?
I do.
And what did he say?
He was not doing good. He was in a bad place. He was very angry and sad at the same time.
Do you recall him saying anything about his job status?
At that time, I do recall him saying he didn't have a job.
What do you recall him saying about the status of his marriage?
That it was crumbling, that Maureen was asking for a divorce.
Do you recall him discussing bankruptcy?
I do.
And what did he say about that?
That the house is being repossessed, that they don't have anything.
Do you recall him discussing where Maureen and his kids would be living?
I do.
And what did he say?
He said that his mother was going to take them in.
And how did he feel about that?
Betrayed, left out, nervous and scared, not knowing where he was going to be able to go. His words were that he wasn't able to go back home because the kids were or to his mom's house because the kids and Maureen would be there.
Now, you know, the defendant, you said, talked to you about filing for bankruptcy, how he wasn't working. Do you remember what else he said regarding why he was in such a bad financial place?
Because he gambled everything away. He just couldn't contain himself when it came to gambling.
Prior to this call, do you recall the defendant talking to you about his issues regarding gambling?
I do.
And do you recall any conversations with the defendant where he discussed the sources of the money he used for his gambling?
I do.
And what sources of money did he use for his gambling?
His paychecks, he would go and gamble them away. All their funds for the house, he would gamble them away. Always thought that he was able to control it.
Do you also recall him saying that he would use college funds for gambling?
I remember him mentioning that he used all funds, that they didn't have any savings.
Did you participate in gambling with him?
I only went to the gambling room, or to a poker room once with Billy, and this is back when him and Maureen were dating. We went to Foxwoods.
So now I want to turn back to that call that you had with him on April 2nd. Did the defendant talk to you about his feelings regarding Maureen's intention to divorce him?
I do.
And what did he say about that?
He said he was torn. He was upset. He kept telling Maureen that he loved her, and she would say she loved him too, but that she still wanted to go forward with the divorce.
What was his tone like during this phone call?
Angry, pissed, and sad, all together.
When discussing what was going on with him and his family during this call, do you recall who the defendant was primarily concerned about?
The bulk of the call was, where is Billy going to be? Where is he going to be able to stay?
So the bulk of the call was Billy being concerned about Billy.
Yes.
And was that conversation that you had with the defendant on Tuesday, April 2nd, the last time that you heard from him before Maureen's death? That was just 2 days later.
Yes.
I'd now like to direct your attention to April 6th, 2019. Following Maureen's death, did the defendant contact you on that date?
He did.
When he called, did you recognize the number?
No.
Can you please tell the jury about that conversation, that initial conversation?
The call on the 6th was a call from William to myself, my home phone number. Actually, no, I think it was my cell phone. He was in a hospital in Connecticut, and he wanted me to get a hold of Brenda to let Brenda know where he was, that he was okay, and how he could be reached.
And after that call, what did you do?
I contacted the state police.
Did you speak with the defendant for a second time?
I did.
And that was on April 6th, 2019?
Yes,
Did you call him?
I did.
And was that phone call recorded by the New Hampshire State Police?
It was.
Did you consent to the recording of that call?
I did.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 40. Do you recognize the CD?
I do.
How do you recognize this?
This is the exhibit of the phone call.
Did you have an opportunity to listen to portions of this phone call prior to today?
I did.
And are those your initials indicated right there on the CD?
With the date, yes.
And does that indicate that you have listened to portions of this call?
The whole call, yes.
And when you listened to the phone call, were you able to identify the voices on that call?
Yes,
And when you first called, did you identify yourself on the call?
I did.
And the person that you were speaking with, the male voice on the call, for the majority of that call, whose voice is that?
William.
Okay, at this point, we're going to play State's Exhibit 40 for the jury, which is about 24 minutes long. And also, the recording will have the transcript of the recording playing beneath it. And if we could just have the lights dimmed just a little bit so people can follow along with the transcript if they'd like.
Hi, I'm trying to get a hold of William Argie.
William?
I'm a friend of his named Ray.
William? He's coming.
Okay, thank you.
I think so.
Hey, what's up? Nothing. How you doing? Yeah. I'm wondering what's the. I didn't get a hold of your mom because when I was getting your mom's phone number, your sister got a hold of me and told me that your mom already found out she was on her way.
Here?
Yes. Okay.
So I don't know if I want that right now.
I don't think I can stop your mom getting there. I mean, I think if I were to try to stop your mom getting there, it would not be good. Your mother is come hell or high water, she's not going to see you. But, I mean, this is pretty shocking there, Billy. I said, this is pretty shocking. You know, seeing everything unfold on the news and seeing everything that's happened.
I don't know if this is a good.
Okay.
Do you understand?
I do. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. How are you?
Sad. Very sad.
Okay. Alright, but, I mean, other than sad, I mean, dude, shit. Where were you?
Yes, Marcus.
Okay. Okay. What happened, dude?
Ready to talk about it.
What is this place? What's this hospital in?
It's a more bigger than a community hospital.
Okay.
But it's, you know, it's like it's actually, I would say it's a lot bigger because it's got like a 30 to 40 bed ER.
Holy crap, that's actually quite large. That's larger than...
Yeah, that's huge. It's huge. That's like when I was working at Lawrence General, we had 50 beds.
So,
So,
I mean, is this, are you at a regular hospital, or are you in
yeah,
a special...
yeah, not a regular hospital, and then obviously, psych unit.
Okay. Alright. Are they helping you? It's not been a day, but I mean, have you talked to anybody good down there about what's happened? Have you discussed anything? Have you been able to go over what's happened? Okay. I don't know, dude. Do you feel comfortable talking with me? Not yet. Alright. You do know I'm here for you though, right?
Yeah, no, I know you guys, that's why I called you.
Okay. Alright. It took me a while to build up the confidence to call, Billy, I'll be honest with you. It's hard. It's hard. I mean, you know, I love you and everything like that, and, you know, I love your family, your kids, and Maureen, and just trying to wrap my head around it, which I'm sure you are. I'm just trying to understand it too.
I'm probably going to be here till Wednesday.
Okay. Why happening Wednesday?
Well, no, it's at least a 5-day admission.
Is it an involuntary admission, or are you volunteering
Yeah.
there?
No, involuntary.
So you're IEA, so you can't leave if you wanted to.
But the applicant and the Connecticut state law, that can't be, it can't hold you more than 10 days.
Okay. Okay.
But anyways, let's just say Wednesday, okay?
Yeah.
Um,
I ain't there. I mean, why are you voluntarily admitted?
I tried to kill myself.
You tried to kill yourself down there?
Ray, I have 6-inch, depth where I went into my radio artery on both sides.
So you tried cutting yourself?
I was successful in cutting myself.
You didn't know what I'm saying. You didn't know what I'm saying. But you weren't successful with completing the act. But you were successful in attempting.
Yeah. I want to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I don't know how I wasn't.
So,
Because I literally saw the radio artery, I severed it, and the blood was gushing out.
so, why did you try to do that, dude?
So I just,
Why did you try to take your own life?
not the time. Right. Right now, I can trust you. Right now, I can't trust this environment.
You know, really, it's the only environment you got.
Yeah.
You gotta tell people what's going on. I mean, shit, dude.
I know,
I'm confused all to hell.
I know.
You know, I mean, Wednesday or Tuesday, you're calling me and you're telling me that you love her, everything, you're gonna do your best to try to make it work. You guys will.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I know, Billy. I'm perplexed. You know, just trying to figure it out, dude. Trying to get ahead of what's going on. You know, and like you said, it's been just a short time here. I'm just trying to make sure you know what's going on. I know. That's why I'm trying to talk through it with you, bud. Okay, I'll wait around. That's fine, I'll give you a ride. I'll wait right here.
All right, okay, hold on.
That's all right.
Okay, are you 659-3581?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know who that is.
Because somebody was trying to call and ask for me.
Yeah, that's not me. That's not even my home phone number. I don't know who that is.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
But you did call your sister and left a message with her.
Yes,
So
but that's not her number either.
no, but she could be at somebody's home. She could be calling from somebody else's place. Okay. And like I said, I was trying to get the number to call your mom when I got hold of your sister to get the number, and she said that your mom had already found out this was on her. So, dude, help me understand what's going on. Because, I mean, it's hard to try to put my head on a pillow at nighttime. I can just imagine what this must feel like for you. You can talk to me.
I know.
Take a breath.
Yeah.
Relax.
I just want my kids taken care of. That's it.
You got the right person. You had your mom pick them up.
And, yeah. I want to talk to everybody and anybody and, but I need to,
Do you want me to talk to these people? I mean, I'm going to be selling candies in Germany.
no. I need to get out of here and then,
Are you going to...
whatever's happening after the state police was here last night.
Exactly. So if and when you leave there on Wednesday, where do you think you're going to go, Bill?
Well, they're at the,
That's what I'm trying to say. Maybe if you are able to talk through it and get through it, you're able to clear your head. You know? I love you, dude, but you gotta work with me. You gotta tell me what the hell's going on. I mean, I got my wife not wanting me to leave the house. She's scared shitless. And I can only imagine what you're going through, dude.
why don't you want to leave the house?
Billy, think about it. Think about what's happened. Think about what's happened. And my wife, you know how emotional Jen is. She's scared for you. She's scared for her. She's scared for our kids. I mean, dude, I know you can come over my house or anything like that, but that doesn't help the fact of what happened. You know?
So what's been on the news?
No, they just announced Maureen's name today. They won't say anything else, Billy. I'm sorry?
The news said that?
It's on WMUR's website. All it says is her name, and that the police have been working on the scene at your house. They don't say anything about the children. I know that your mom's watching them, and Kelly and Karen are. I've gotten a hold of Danny and told Danny in Germany what's going on, but I mean, dude, he's in flight. I'm not going to be giving him updates till he gets here because he won't even be able to handle the flight.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to figure out for myself what the hell's going on, dude. How can some guy I played golf with, some guy who sat with my mom and held her hand after Dad died, do something like this?
Alright, alright, I gotta get going, right? Okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Do you want me to call you back?
No.
Can you tell me anything, Billy?
I haven't done anything other than just try to take my life.
What happened, Maureen? What happened, Maureen?
I don't know.
There's got to be something, buddy. You gotta tell me something. Did you guys get in an argument? I know you didn't hurt her on purpose.
I gotta get going. Right. Okay.
I'd like to say okay, Billy, but I don't want to hang up.
I know.
I love you, and I don't want to hang up. I want you to be able to.
Yeah, I love you too, buddy, but I'm...
How would you run back to Hampshire, Billy? That's what I'm trying to ascertain, Bill. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
See you later. They're the ones that told me that I'm not going back with them now.
Who told you that?
State police.
In Connecticut?
No, it has nothing to do with it.
Well, other than the fact that you're in Connecticut, I would probably agree with you, but I mean...
Yeah, I mean, they didn't even call the Connecticut State Police to come.
I just don't want you to go through this alone. Okay? I don't want other people to what's going on here. I want you to be able to tell me what's going on. I want you to be able to let me go through this with you. Let me be there with you.
Yeah. It's all too early.
It's going to get really late really quick. Wednesday's going to be a blink away.
Yeah.
I know you love her. I mean, you told me that 30 times when we talked on the phone on Tuesday.
Right. Okay.
I've been there for you, Billy. You know this.
I know. Okay. But I don't, they said no, but I don't trust. I don't trust it.
Who said no?
This isn't being recorded.
Okay. Who said no to that?
So.
I hear you. You don't need to be afraid, Bill. You need to tell people what happened.
Yeah, but you know what?
Up the police station. All right.
Yeah. I know.
We know all your mom's going to tell you to do is to tell everybody what went on.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I don't want to break her heart, but this is an area where she did me pissed off. All I have to do is just walk out and say, can you please ask for removal?
Agreed. I totally understand that. That's why I don't want you to have to get to that. I want you to be able to talk about it.
I want people to respect what I want to talk, what I want to talk about, and how I want to talk about it. The thing is all this pushing and just saying that everything's going to be okay, everything's going to be okay, everything's going to be okay, you're going to get through this. It's not. That's actually been making it worse. It's actually been making it worse.
I understand that.
Yeah.
No.
No. Right. I didn't say that. You were the one that said that.
I know. I just feel like right now you're getting tired of me talking to you. And right now, shit, though, you're not here to talk to you. Okay? I don't want to talk to anybody else. I don't want to hear from your sister, your mother, or anybody else. I want to hear from you. You know, everybody else is a pain of all the fuck, dude. It doesn't mean shit to me. You knew what I was going to do. You know this. I've been there with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And I think visitation's already over for today.
You might want to stay away from your mom. You told them after the visitations.
No. Telephone calls, you can have it. I think up till 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, talk to me, dude. What the fuck? Don't worry about it. Shit. I'm scared for you, dude. You tell me you're trying to keep your own life.
Scared for myself.
Oof.
Scared for my kid.
That's what I need to fucking talk to. Talk this over with me.
You know? Scared that I had the world and, you know?
You still can't have the world, Billy.
No,
You just can't have all.
not tonight, James.
You can't have all.
No. What I heard, they told me.
Who told you?
It was
Didn't you already know? Because that doesn't make sense. You have to have a guy to do something like that. You know, you've got way too much going on with you and your kids don't want to take your own life.
I probably won't be able to talk to her.
True, honestly, it might be a good idea not to go to my mom's side because I know your mom's not the one to help you.
I just totally limited that. You know what? It's time for me to be selfish. Okay? Everybody's saying, heal me. Well, I'm being selfish now. I'm healing me, and everything outside of these walls I don't care about right now.
I understand.
So,
I'm glad you're finally stepping up and, you know, not letting
yeah.
mom.
So, I think it's an asshole way of being, but,
No, you've been living your whole life with your mother and sisters and everybody telling you what to do. Now's your time. Now's your time. You said you need to heal. You need to do what you need to do. I agree with you. That's not productive.
anyways, I do want to talk to you, but can I have a break?
Yeah,
It is,
oh, you got it. You can talk.
Call me back, when you call me back in a few hours.
Call you back in a couple hours?
Yeah. I'll put you on,
You gonna be
yeah, I'll put you on the list. Yeah, I'll put you on the list.
All right, I'm gonna.
I haven't put anybody on the list because I haven't been able to get a hold of anybody.
I'll put me on the list, but I'll call you in a couple hours. All right?
Alright.
But I want you to talk to me. You gotta be. I love you. Please, please figure this out and talk to me. Okay?
Alright.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Mr. Caron, I'd like to ask you some questions about the conversation that you just heard. At the start of the call, you and the defendant discussed the hospital he was staying at, the type of hospital and its size. Did he talk to you about why he was at the hospital?
No, I think I brought it up to him,
What did he say he did that landed him in the hospital?
that he tried to commit suicide. He tried cutting himself. Or he accomplished that.
Did you ask him why he tried to kill himself?
I did.
And what was his response?
But he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to go over it.
At one point during the call, the defendant was talking to you about wanting people to respect when he wanted to talk. Did he discuss people telling him in the past that everything was going to be okay and he was going to get through it?
Yes, he said that everyone was always telling him that, and it didn't make it any better.
And Mr. Caron, I'm just going to ask you to keep your voice up just so the jury can hear you.
Sure.
Toward the end of the call, what did he tell you? Who did he tell you at the end of the call was his priority?
He was.
During the call, did you ever ask him what happened to Maureen?
Several times.
What was his response?
That he wasn't ready to talk about it.
Did he also tell you that he didn't know?
He did. He mentioned that once in there.
Did he talk to you about the state police notifying him about Maureen?
He did. He said that they had informed him that she had passed.
Did he ask you any questions about Maureen?
No. Other than what was going on the news.
Did he express any concern for her?
No.
Have you spoken to the defendant since that recorded telephone call?
No.
If I may just have a moment. Okay, I have no further questions at this time. Thank you. Morning, Mr. Caron.
Good morning.
After the intervention, did Mr. Billy Argie basically tell you and Dan that you guys were dead to him?
Yes.
And took a phone call from you a couple months later to make sure that Billy was coming to your wedding?
There was a communication just prior to the wedding.
Okay, so 2 months went by and he was still angry.
I gathered so. He never communicated back.
But when you saw, he came to the wedding.
Yes.
He came to the wedding with Maureen,
Correct.
and they appeared to be doing better.
They appeared to be Billy and Maureen. I don't know how you would categorize better.
Okay, well, it was better than the intervention.
Yes.
It's fair to say that since the wedding, you had not had any contact, much contact with Maureen,
Correct.
and your contacts were primarily with Billy.
Correct.
And when you had contacts with Billy, let me go back to the intervention. In addition to, I think you said that the purpose of the intervention was because Billy was verbally
Aggressive.
aggressive. Who organized the intervention?
I believe it was organized through Brenda, because we met at her house prior to going to Billy and Maureen's home to go over what we were to go to the intervention for.
And was there a professional there?
What do you mean by professional?
Did anybody there with experience in facilitating an intervention?
No.
All right. So did you meet at Brenda's house the same day as you went to intervene on Billy's behalf?
I believe so, yes.
And when you met at Brenda's house, it wasn't the topic of gambling discussed?
That was one of the topics.
And wasn't it the topic that Maureen was concerned about?
I don't understand. I don't understand the question. Sorry.
Didn't Maureen express concerns about Billy's gambling at that meeting?
Amongst other things, correct. Well, Maureen wasn't at that meeting.
Maureen was not at the meeting at Brenda's house?
No.
She was not one of the ones that was participating in the intervention?
She was, but she wasn't there. She was at home with Billy.
And so after the wedding, you said that you talked to Billy or saw Billy about once every other month after that?
Every month to month and a half up until around the holidays. Then after the holidays, we kind of lost touch.
Okay. And it's fair to say that when you guys got in touch, you would just sort of catch up with each other's family's life?
I would ask him how he's doing, how the kids are doing, how everything's going on at home, and he'd do the same.
So it's just a normal conversation?
Correct. There were other things that happened during that time frame as well.
Right, and I'm not asking you about
Okay.
that. So when you heard from Billy in April of 2019, that wasn't necessarily a surprise to you?
No, I mean, he had called me a couple days before that and left me a message to get a hold of him.
Okay, and so at some point you guys talked. You talked the next day when you returned the call, or
I think it was a couple
same
days,
day?
but yeah.
Okay, and when you talked for about a half hour,
Give or take.
and that's not unusual when you talk to Billy.
No, usually our conversations are a lot longer.
Okay, and so when he started the conversation, he asked about your family.
This conversation went straight into what was going on.
And in terms of what's going on, he was telling you that there is a divorce, that Maureen was filing for a divorce. Right?
Oh, correct, yes.
And that they had to sell the house,
Correct?
and there was talk of bankruptcy,
Correct?
and that Maureen was going to be moving in with his mother.
Maureen and the children,
Yeah.
yes.
And that he didn't have a job that day.
He told me he did not have a job.
And you tried to talk him through it, right?
Yeah?
You were talking him through about how hard he should try in reconciling, right?
I actually told him to stop asking Maureen why she wanted a divorce. I told him to stop asking her, does she love him? Because any answer he gets is not going to be one he likes.
And he received that advice.
He said that, yeah.
He said, thank you, you have a way of, like, explaining things.
I don't think he used those words, but yes.
Okay, and so it's fair to say when somebody's life is changing, such as a divorce, it's not unusual to reach out to a best friend.
Correct.
And you described him as being angry and pissed and sad at the same time. That's not unusual for Billy. He has a range of emotions. That's
Yeah.
accurate?
I would say going through that, yes.
All right. And at the end of the conversation, he was just sad and appreciative of your advice.
Correct. There was actually, at the end of the conversation, we had mentioned about getting together on Saturday with me, him, and Danny.
And Danny, who was that day,
Was in Germany.
Germany.
Or on his way. No, he was in Germany at the time. He wasn't on his way home yet.
I may have a moment, Your Honor.
You may.
Oh, by the way, after you talked to Bill on, I guess it was the 5th or the 6th,
On the phone call?
yeah.
Yeah.
You saw Dan when he came back from Germany?
I didn't see him right away, no. We spoke when he got back and touched base, and I tried to get him up to date about where Billy was, what had happened, but that's about as far as it went. We didn't see each other for a little while.
Okay, so you talked on the phones with him?
Mhm.
You talked on the phone with his family?
With Billy's family?
Yeah.
No.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, may this witness be excused by both sides?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sir, you can step down, you can stay or leave as you choose. Thank you.
Thank you.
It might make sense to have our lunch recess unless you have a witness.
Yes, no, the next witness will not be a 15-minute.
Okay, great.
So that seems prudent.
Okay, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we can be back at a quarter of the hour to resume, remember all my instructions to you. Thank you so much.